The eighth and final film in the Mission Impossible franchise. This was a top 5 most anticipated film of the whole year for me. And was it a satisfying final film in this series? Yes, it was. But, yeah, there's a few buts. Full honesty, the first half of this film I saw had some rough spots. There were some aspects of that first half that did not work for me and I was not a fan of. For starters, there are a lot of callbacks and references to the old Mission Impossible films, and every time they do it, they flash a clip, like 3 seconds or so, of a character or an event from one of those old films that they're referencing. You saw it in the trailer, and I was fine with it in the trailer, but they actually do it in the film, and they do it quite a bit in the first half. And after a while, it started to feel really forced and not very organic in the way it was executed and the way those quick flashbacks were inserted into the film. It just felt very choppy, and it really irritated me at one point because they meet this character and Simon Pegg's character Benji says, "Hey, you're this character from Mission Impossible 1. And then the film flashes back to the character from Mission Impossible 1. And he's like, "Yeah, I am that character from Mission Impossible 1. And then 20 minutes later, another character goes, "Hey, you're that character from Mission Impossible 1." And they do the exact same flash on the screen as they did earlier. And I was like, film, why are you doing it again? You've already done this. I already know who that character is. Why are you flashing back to it again? There's also the character who was hunting Ethan in the last film. I can't remember his name, that guy. And in this film, they reveal that he's the son of the villain from the first Mission Impossible film. The film feels like it has a need to tie it in so much to the old Mission Impossible films for it to feel like a proper send-off to the franchise, when it just doesn't need to do that at all. They don't need to go the George Lucas direction and have this character be the son of this character from the old film and have that element from Mission Impossible 3 tie into the plot of this film so much. But also in that first half, there were some dialogue scenes that felt a bit off. There are a couple of moments of humour that felt really awkwardly inserted into the film. In fact, I'll say this, I don't know if anybody else will feel the same way, but the first half of this film almost felt like it was directed by somebody else, not Christopher McQuarrie. There was something about the visual style and just the vibe of the film that just felt different. It didn't feel like the last film, which is weird considering it was a back-to-back production more or less. But I think the number one issue in that first half for me was the pacing. It felt like the film was kind of trucking through mud because it was taking a long time to get to the objective. They're pretty much building up to the submarine sequence to get to the Sevastopol, and there were just loads of little scenes, little moments that just did not need to be there. Take out the scene of Haley Atwell being trained on the bobsleigh by the guy's wife in the middle of the Arctic. I understand build up, and I get that they were trying to make you really feel the stakes, but after a while, I was starting to get a bit restless, and then it cuts back to Ethan Hunt, and he's now running on a treadmill and training. I was like, oh, come on, can we just get to the mission, please? The vast majority of my issues with the film are in that first half, maybe first 45 minutes or so. When Ethan Hunt arrives on the aircraft carrier, that's when the film picks up a little bit. A lot of those issues kind of subsided, and I'll just say it, the second half of this film, phenomenal. Absolutely amazing. The submarine scene that the first half is building up to, masterful. The suspense is off the charts. It is riveting as hell, really smartly constructed, and I was just on the edge of my seat for the entire time. And then the climax, the biplane sequence. Oh my god. Awe-inspiring is the term. Absolutely incredible. The real biplanes in the sky and the real Tom Cruise on the side of that frigging biplane going all around it. It's the magnum opus of the Mission Impossible series. I don't see how they would top that. If they were to do a Mission Impossible 9, I don't see how they up themselves from that plane sequence. It was an incredible climax of the film, extremely exciting, and it lived up to all my hopes and dreams when I saw the trailer. Yeah, the second half of this film really saved it in every regard. Not just the action scenes and the excitement and the exhilaration, but also the tone, because this film has a bit of a different feel to it than the other Mission Impossible films, because the previous Mission Impossible films had a fun popcorn vibe to them. This one is a much more somber film, and it has this feeling of foreboding dread in the background, which really, really works for the entity and the insane threat that it poses. And in the first half, I think it's because of the pacing and those callbacks where I struggle to kind of relax into that new approach. But in the second half, once the film felt like Christopher McQuarrie was directing it again. The stakes, the dread, the tone, it really, really worked for me, and it was different in a really, really good way. It fit the story, and they made you feel the stakes. When it cuts back to, like the command center with the president and all the like secretaries of state and the head of the army and stuff trying to make these calls and decisions, and you see the map where the nuclear arsenals of the countries are going offline one by one, the doomsday clock is ticking, 0 hours approaching, and it's just out of this world intense. You feel the stakes in every single second of that second half of the film. And those stakes, with that incredible tension, gives the film an appropriate feel of finality, like the plane scene, and how I don't see how they would top that. I don't know how they would have bigger stakes than this film if they were to have done another Mission Impossible film. So they definitely chose the right story, the right threat for the last film in the franchise. And one last thing I wanted to mention real quick was Gabriel, the human villain. I really liked him in the last film because they established this mysterious backstory and his ties to Ethan Hunt's pre-IMF days. And I was hoping for them to kind of elaborate a bit more on that in this film, and they kind of don't. They give you a basic gist, but they don't really go into detail as to who he is, what's his background. In this film, he's the human villain, and I liked the direction they took his character in this film after the end of the last one. That was interesting, but I was left a bit wanting a bit more from his character, and I still have questions about him and his backstory, so I'll categorize Gabriel as a mild disappointment. About halfway through Final Reckoning, I was hit by this big feeling of disappointment because the film that I'd been watching up until that point just paled in comparison to the previous Mission Impossible films. But again, that second half, the film focused up, a lot of that stuff went away, and the second half of The Final Reckoning was everything I wanted the film to be. But that first half being what it was with all those flaws, it frustratingly holds the film back from being an amazing complete package from beginning to end. And that's annoying. But I have to stress, the second half of the film I really, really loved. The submarine sequence, the plane sequence, the story and the stakes in general really just packed an amazing punch. Really, really great stuff. Everything that I wanted from this film, just, again, from the beginning all the way to the end. When the end credits rolled, I took a big breath, a big sigh, and I was like, wow, that was a ride. They turned the film around, and overall, The Final Reckoning is a unfortunately flawed, yet still a all-around stupendous entry into the Mission Impossible series, but also a satisfying and overall fulfilling send-off for this franchise and for Ethan Hunt as a character.